Welcome to Faith and Calm. This is Faith and Calm, number 141. And tonight is Tess Tavis. What is Tess Tavis? Tess Tavis is the day before. No, not Tavis. Tess Shvat. I like the sound of Tess Tavis. It's Tess Shvat. It's the 9th of Shvat, which is the day before the 10th of Shvat. What is the 10th of Shvat? Well, we've been talking about that. That is the day that the Rebbe became Rebbe. Also, the day the year before that the previous Rebbe had a histalkus. So he went up to Shemayim. I was debating whether that was the topic for tonight. There's other things we could talk about in the parsha or something like that. And then I heard this story and I said, I think I got my message. This is the idea. People will find something useful from this. And that is why we are here. And that's what the class is about, is to try and give you and to give me and to give Shalom Jehudas faith and calm and something to thrive on. So it was Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, and he has been giving a 6-part class in depth, in detail on the subject. And the woman wrote him and she said, I have a hard time with this class. It's very deep. I find myself really working very hard to stay awake and to keep track and to understand what's going on and so forth, because it's new subjects and it seems like but she said, let me tell you a story because I really found it was extremely useful in a very practical way. She introduced herself. She said that I shouldn't say where she lived or what her background was, but they did say that she was a divorced single mother with a teenage daughter, and she's been having a lot of challenges with this teenage daughter, and they haven't been communicating well. It's a difficulty being around her. And at one point in time, this daughter said she had enough with her mother and said she's going to go to live with the father, who the father had been used to be religious, but now is the opposite of anything connected with Judaism. And she lived with him for a while. And then she came back. The grass wasn't greener over there. She came back home. But again, this woman says she's been struggling with this issue and communicating with her. And she says she can, she takes care of her physical needs and what she needs in the house. But she is just a very impulsive, live for the moment kind of person. And she has a daughter, and she has a lot of trouble just being around her because their values and what they want to do are just so different. And so she was struggling with this. And in the meantime, she was listening to this class. And then she said she heard this class, and then she finally realized, she just saw everything in a different light. She saw her situation with her daughter in a different light. She saw how she could talk to her daughter in a different way. And she says it's really been making a big impact on her whole attitude of what's with her life. And she sounded to thank Rabbi YY so much for doing this class and for having, and explaining these concepts, because it just it's been a game changer for her.
And what was the class? What is the class called?
And this is the classes that I've been giving for the last 3 weeks. So let me explain what it does and what the idea is. Let me pin myself so it doesn't swing back and forth. So as I said before, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away on Yud Shevat 1950. And the night of that, he gave out a mimer, a Hasidic discourse, which he had been giving out. They had been printing pamphlets with his thoughts for about 2 years because he wasn't speaking anymore. And so nobody expected anything special for that Shabbos. But then when he finally passed away on that Shabbos, they realized that this is sort of his last will and testimony and his directive to what to us, Hasidim, and what we should be continuing to do in continuing his mission. And the Rebbe picked it up the next year and explained it every year, and really explained it how it is not only it's the mission of our generation, and our generation is the capstone, it's the seventh generation, and our generation is the one that brings Mashiach. And therefore, it's basically giving us our goal statement, why we are here in this world, which is an important thing to know. As I have said before, but Rabbi Friedman says it's very difficult to deal with life if you don't know why you're here. If you think that, that you were here because you have problems, and once you get all your issues and all your problems taken care of, then you can have your life. You're going to be very disappointed with life because it just keeps giving you more issues and more problems. And then what kind of a statement is that? The whole reason that the soul came down to this world is to have a bunch of problems and finally to try and solve them. That's not a very positive look at way of life. We're here for a purpose, and we're here to accomplish something big. And each one of us is here to accomplish something very big. So the mission statement of Basi Lugani is, it says, yes, you are here, and you are here to actually to make this world, to transform this world, to make it what it was supposed to be in the beginning of Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. And that Garden of Eden got concealed, and it got removed. That happened through 7 generations, each one progressively pushing God away from this world. And only with Abraham did it start to come back to this world, and then from Abraham to Yitzhak, and then from Yitzhak to Yaakov, and each one brought it down from one higher level to another. And we are finally here in this generation, the 7th generation. The 7th was Moshe. He gave us the tools, and he said, here is your project. You are supposed to make a Beit HaMikdash. It's not a Beit HaMikdash only in a physical place in Jerusalem, but by each and every Jew making himself into a dwelling place for godliness, a place where God would feel at home in his house, in his life, in his environment. Each Jew doing that is what makes the temple be a reality. The temple is not made of only the bricks in Jerusalem. It is made out of each house. In fact, the Rebbe many times would say that when Mashiach comes, all the shuls and all the houses will collaborate together and become the third temple. So when we transform our situations and our lives and make them what they're supposed to be, that actually we help start making that process of revealing godliness in this world, a place where you actually can see that the whole point of the world is godliness. And it is godliness, and it always was godliness. It only got pushed away. It's a battle, and we talked about that in previous classes. It's a battle. It's a struggle. It doesn't come without effort, and it doesn't come without work. And the ultimate level of work, because nothing is more hard work than a battle, because in a battle you could lose everything and you can gain everything. It's not, it's really the hardest kind of form, the most involving kind of struggle. And yet that's how God has set it up, because ultimately he wants, this world is antagonistic to godliness, and he wants to have a place in this world which is struggling to try and say, no, I don't want to have anything to do with God. I don't want to have anything to do with godliness. I don't care about godliness. I don't need godliness. And in that very place, we are transforming the world. Now, the theme of this year, a special theme of this year, is all about how godliness actually is present here in this world, and how it's up, and how we can, if we open our eyes and see it, we can actually appreciate the godliness in this world. That there is that when I said that God is pushed away, it means only that it's easy to look at the world and to not see anything about godliness, but it's always present there. There was a famous scientist, physicist, name was Heisenberg, I think he wrote, and he had arguments with Einstein. And I think Einstein once wrote him back and was saying, the reason you don't see this way of looking at things is because, let me give you an example, a mashal. Nice Jewish example. He said, you're like a fisherman. You went to the ocean, and you have a net and you did a test and you put your net in the ocean and you pulled out all the fish. And your conclusion was that there are no fish in the ocean that are smaller than 2 inches. You did the test, you put the net in, went in all different places in the ocean, and you never found anything other than fish that are bigger than 2 inches. Einstein says the problem is that the holes in your net are size 2 inches. And therefore, your tools and your way of examining reality is that when you look at things with that perspective, you don't find. But if you had better tools, you would find it. The same thing too is us when we look at the world. When we look at the world and we see it, we take it at face value, at eye value. When you use your physical eye to try and see reality, then you see reality. And you say, that's reality. It's ants and it's houses and it's buildings and it's roads and it's planes. And that's what it is. And there's nothing more. The secular world is very strong in that way. On the other hand, if you look for things like love and consciousness and morality, they don't exist. They don't take up any space. You can't measure them. You can't see them. You can't. So they don't exist. You understand the problem? The problem is the way we look at the world. The problem is the way we try and understand the world and the way with the tools that we look at it. And when we look at things in a more holy way, in a more spiritual way, when we connect more in a spiritual way, then we see the world in a different way. And that is what we say, that there is no lamata lamala ad ein tachlis. No matter how low in this world you go, if you actually get the idea at its core, it is godliness there. And therefore, there's no reason to be afraid or to be upset when something goes wrong, when something is hurtful. Okay, fine. At an emotional level, you can't deny the fact that you're hurt or upset about what it is. But on the deeper level, a person can also say, I can look with the eyes of Avraham Avinu, who was a spiritual person, and to say, you know what? There's something here. There's something here because I didn't create the situation. Even if I messed up and it looks like I'm being punished, it's still God who did the activity. And therefore, there is ultimately in every place, no matter how far away, no matter how like Oklahoma or wherever, how much distance the place looks like, there is godliness there waiting to be revealed. And it's only my talent and only my abilities that I have to use to pull it out. That I found to be an extremely comforting idea.
What did you say? You said it's only your abilities that what?
Only your abilities, only your tools, only your talents, only your musical, your interspiritual soul that needs to be able to look at it. So when people say there's nothing there, they're right. From their perspective, there's nothing there. When husbands and wives get into arguments, they can look at it a couple different ways. They can look at it purely on the physical level, or they can look at it at the godly level. And depending on how you look at the situation, that is how it's going to manifest itself. In fact, physics talks all about it these days. They say that the whole world is a paradox and that everything exists in multiple states at the same time. And it's only the observer who actually collapses the probability function to make it appear either as an electron or as a wave or anything else. So physics also confirms this very fact, that it's really up to us and how we look at how we interpret the world is how it actually turns out to be. When we interpret that thing as, oh my gosh, there's something here that's potentially good to happen here. Or we can look at the world and say, I'm not going anywhere, and this isn't going anywhere, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And you know what? You're right. If you want to, you can say that's what it is. You can do that because that is God's ability to hide himself in this physical world. God can hide himself in such a way that it looks like it has absolutely nothing to do with God. But the fact of the matter is, it's all God. I mean, even the fact that we call nature, right? Nature operates by itself. It doesn't need God. Yeah, but how did that happen? All nature operates in a very, very brilliant way. That little bee understands, there are PhDs who study the bee their whole life, And they can write books and books and books about all the wisdom and how the colonies work and how the bee works and how the families work and all that other stuff. Who made all that stuff? Random chance? If you were really, like one of these atheist scientists, you would say, yeah, it's all random. How is that possible? How is it possible? And they always follow the rules. They never do something else. You get a bunch of kids together, they always break the rules and so forth. But no, the bees, the planets, everything follows the rules. Nature follows its rules. It's because there's godliness in there. There's godly wisdom inside there. Therefore, that it all operates in a very, very orderly manner with a lot of wisdom. Consciousness. These guys who go around speaking, about there's no God and there's atheism and science has replaced God and all this other kind of stuff. They can't explain the idea of consciousness, but consciousness is something we all experience. We all know what it means to be conscious and not conscious. So we know there's such a thing. But why would it develop? Just random events just happened and we just feel like we're conscious. It's such a silly argument. It's such an empty argument. So the core of this year's topic is all about how godliness and God is here in every part of the world. It's always there. It's always been there. It's there, but we are the ones who actually do to bring it out. And that is what the rest of the Mimer of the Basilagani talks about. It says, you have to do this. If God did what he could do, but when God does it, wouldn't have been a world. When it's the world, people in the world itself who are part of this world, who fight the battles, who are on the front line, who are the soldiers, who go in and struggle and work and try and pray every day to try and lift themselves up to a little bit of a higher way of looking at the world and to learn Torah and to come to classes. And yes, there's a lot of more interesting things you could do. There's a lot of more fun things you can do than to come to this class. There's things that are more pleasant. But on the other hand, boy, I don't know how you can survive. I don't know if you don't know that there's a secret to this whole business. And it's not just about getting what you need to get done in the day. It's about seeing the world in a truer and more magnificent way. And you see our role, our personal role in being on the frontline troops and given these treasures, the treasures of the king. He's giving it to you because he knows you have the secret to unraveling that particular place, that particular location that you happen to be, the people that you come in contact with, the times that you do, your particular insight. And God is closest to you, and he sits there and he watches. In the Mimer and Basilagani, in the second half, it says that that God and his whole angelic staff come and they listen to the Jews who are sitting and learning Torah. When this is sitting and learning Torah, it also means the ones who are praying or anyone else who's calling out to Hashem. He comes and he says, wow, you never saw something like this in heaven. In heaven, it's all light and it's all good. And therefore, there's no struggle here. But when a Jew who sits in a dark place and a difficult place, and in a place where the world is constantly spreading fake news and what it thinks is the truth, and yet it sits there and he says, you know what? I know that there's something higher here. It's like that little boy who went into the stables once, and he was looking and it was full of manure. He was looking under this manure and that manure and all the other manure, and his father comes in and says, what are you doing in the stables looking for all the manure? He says, well, there's all this manure here. There must be a pony somewhere. So yeah, there's manure around. There's a lot of manure in life, and there's a lot of difficulties in life. But it means that somebody did that manure. The pony must have done it. There's a pony here somewhere. This is the optimistic. This is the class. This is the faith and calm. This is our optimism. Our optimism is that we know that there's something there, and we know that specifically in the places where sometimes seems the darkest, That's where the most light is, actually, because that's the only God could have made such complete darkness. Only God could have done that. It doesn't come about by itself. It doesn't happen happenstance. And so the fact that we are in this generation, specifically at this particular time, means that we are very much empowered and enabled and especially chosen. Of all the generations of Jews that existed before, we are the ones that actually help bring Mashiach, because we are finally lifting up the bottom of the building, and you can only lift the building from the very bottom, and you can only do it from where it's very darkest. And so that's our pleasure, and that's our privilege, and that is actually, and God is invested in us. He's invested because this is his mission, and like the king, he puts himself on the line. That's I think one of the big lessons that I get from Basi Lagani and from the message of this year. And I dedicate this class to Many Bas Eli, who is Shlomish's cousin, who passed away on this night, the 9th of Shvat, and many now it's been a few years ago. And also to my wife said we should also dedicate it to the 7 holy people who were killed for no good reasons. They were doing CPR and trying to save other people, and they were just gunned down senselessly in Jerusalem. And so we also we dedicate this life to them, that should be the last bits of darkness that have to be elevated, and that and we will through this final push of the struggle, the battle, everything will come out in the very best of ways. And with that, I'm going to turn over the microphone to
Shimon.
Sure, go ahead.
Could you give like a practical application of that? So, for instance, you hear something terrible in the news, and are you supposed to say, well, there's God's behind it, or how are you supposed to look at it, like some of the news from this week? How do you keep yourself above it and apply what you were just teaching about?
Life is a paradox, and only God could create such complete paradoxes. It's not, if it all happened logically, then it would all fall into nature. Nature you can dissect and you can analyze and you can say what caused this, and caused this, and caused that. The whole idea of a paradox is obviously the two completely opposite things can coexist. Light and darkness don't have any place where they meet. They sit in different worlds. They're different. They're completely opposite. They have no intercommunication with each other. So the very fact that you can have such concealment must mean, does mean that that it's so disturbing. Must mean also that I am disturbed is part also of the fact that I just don't, if I was a pure atheist, I would just say, hey, it's random. It just happens. I mean, just as much as the stone can fall here, it can fall there. Everything is a random act. And therefore, why would I be bothered by it? Why would I be disturbed by it? Why would I be upset about it? As Simon Jacobson once said to a guy, he'd become a big atheist, but he knew that the whole family was disturbed that their sister had been killed in a senseless train accident. They were going through an intersection. It was dark, and the train hit the car, and the girl was killed. And they were very, very upset with God and whatever. And he said, why? Just say that's the way the cookie crumbles. If you really are such an atheist, why should you be so upset about the situation? So looking at it as an atheist, as a person who doesn't think that there's anything around here, you wouldn't be bothered at all. The people who are bothered by it are the people who say the world is supposed to be good. And there's a voice in me that says it's supposed to be good. And I'm upset that it's not good. And I'm upset that I can't see it turning out right. And it is bothersome. Now, you know what? I know why that's happening. God is giving me a message. Keep going. Do something. Take that. Take the energy. Take that disturbance and do something with it. Use it as an energy. Don't just sit there and become depressed about it. Use it to do something for someone else. Go and do a random act of kindness for somebody else. Do a nice thing for somebody else. Use that energy and just say, you know what? I'm gonna, I feel something inside myself, and therefore I'm gonna do something for someone else. Wow, you can do a lot that way. You can do a lot that way. You can very practically. You will feel good. You will feel like a servant of God. You will feel like a soldier on the front line, and you will feel like you're actually making history in this world, because people will look at you and they say, "I don't understand. Why did you just cocoon and roll up and just curse and be bitter and." No. The whole message here is, wow, I don't take things as purely as random and I'm indifferent and so forth. I have a live soul in myself, and you're aware of your soul, and you're aware of your godliness inside of yourself, that you can do more and more and more and more for people. And yeah. It doesn't take away, it doesn't stop the other stuff, but it's empowering, I think. Did that help a little bit? Doesn't sound like, but it's the practical approach.
It doesn't solve it completely. I mean, I think part of the way that I think about it is I just think that I don't know. I think that we have to just keep empowering ourselves with what the Rebbe called a good eye, trying to think and hope and pray and for truth and transparency, and for an end to false narratives about things, and and maybe if that happens, and for decency, and civility again. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know. I know we are. And I think just the fact that we know that God is behind things, and that God can be revealed, and we have the power to draw God down, through mitzvot and things like that, does give you encouragement.
It does.
I think. So it's like what you said, if you go to Oklahoma and you have, you can see what you can do there, you can see what you can do at work, or you find yourself in a place, you can see what you can do to make it better.
Right. Serve.
And reach out. So it does help, because you just said, reach out to somebody, do something good for somebody else. And that's really what it's about, drawing more light down into the world by doing those things. Yes, it did help. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
It takes a minute.
Thank you for your comments.
Takes a minute to think it through,
It does. It's not. But that effort and that work and that is very good. And like I said, God and His angels are coming to listen to this. They're saying, "That's really amazing what you just said. Let me hear that again." You're down here in this world. Here in heaven, it's all fine. You're in this world, and you are connecting to my deepest truths about what purpose and what the reality is all about, and how the darkness really can be pushed away with one little candle, and there's really no reality to it. It's just merely about you bringing a little light in there. Wow, you're revealing something, the biggest secrets in this world. Right? God is interesting, because the angels can only be a reflection of light, but the idea of a light that comes out of the darkness is far more powerful than a light that just grows by itself. The fact that darkness can shine itself can only happen when there is what we call the essence of God there, because God is beyond darkness and God is beyond light. And only God Himself can reunite these two things together. So when a person says, in the darkness, I'm going to bring out a light, not that I have a light inside me, but that I'm going to bring out a light exactly in the darkness, then you really are connecting to the deepest places of God, a deepest level of God, revealing Him. And that is what can transform the world. When there is complete opposition, The only way to get rid of that is to go to a higher place. And you have to ultimately sometimes go to the very highest place where all of this is all meant to serve God. And it never was revealed before, and it's only being revealed now. And we're the ones that are doing it. We are the ones that are doing it. And that's very powerful. And we get the blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasher Koach.
Hi.
Nice
Good to see you. And
to see you.
yeah, good to see you. Thank you for having your, and I would love to see everybody's face. So anyway, I'm going to be brief because I'm going to be brief. So the name of the class was there's an extraordinary opportunity this week to free your soul. So starting tomorrow night is Yud Shevat, and all day Wednesday. It's a tradition on the day that it's a powerful spiritual day, and it's a tradition to write some. First, let me say the four things I always say before I begin, and then I'm going to tell you about Yud Shevat, and then I'm going to tell you a couple stories. So the things that I always say are that number one, we're in an extraordinary time, and it might be very challenging to understand how an event like as the one that happened in Jerusalem a couple of days ago, how that could happen when we are in the unfolding of the redemption, but we are in the unfolding of the redemption. And I'm going to speak a little bit about that later, about how can you have such strange things happening. And we know that our souls were handpicked to be in this time. We know we were given all the tools that we need to navigate this time. And we know that, what we're doing tonight by actively learning about the redemption, we are speeding it just by learning about it. So tomorrow night, Yud Shevat begins. And on Yud Shevat, it is a tradition, and you don't have to be a chassid to do this, to write something called a pidyon nefesh. Pidyon nefesh means a redemption of the soul. Now, it used to be extremely common, especially in the Middle Ages, that Jews worked for these landlords and these estate owners, and if for some reason they couldn't pay their whatever they had to do, their rent, whatever, the landowner would throw the entire family in a pit, and they would end up starving there, dying there, unless somebody came up with a ransom for them, and that's what the Jews did. They would come up, they would raise money. It was a very common thing in the Middle Ages to raise money to ransom these souls, these Jewish souls, from death, and that was called pidyon nefesh. Pidyon nefesh means that the soul is trapped somewhere. They were literally trapped in a hole, and they had to be redeemed. And when we write a pidyon nefesh, it's because our soul is also trapped. Our soul is trapped by simply being down here in this world, in this very confusing world, and also our soul is trapped by the things that we've done that hurt the soul, the things that we've done that are difficult for the soul. So we need somebody who can pull us out. We need somebody who can ransom our souls. So the Rebbe is a person who has pull in heaven, and what we do is we write a letter to the Rebbe. You can put the Hebrew letters pei and then a quotation mark and then nun, and that means pidyon nefesh. And then and you can say, in Hebrew we say ana la'or rachmim, but you can say it in English. This is to arouse mercy for my soul. You don't say my soul. This is to arouse mercy for the soul of Malkadina Bas Elisheva. You put your Hebrew name, and then you write what it is that you need, what it is that is troubling you terribly, that you need help with. what it is in your life, how the Rebbe can help you physically and spiritually and physically. And along with that pidyon nefesh, we don't do this all the time when we write to the Rebbe, but when we write a pidyon nefesh, a redemption of the soul, on a powerful day like Yud Shevat, we also give money to a Chabad institution. There's a Chabad institution called, I had it right here. No, I don't have it.
Kolel Chabad.
Pardon?
Kolel Chabad. I just
Chabad. There's one that you traditionally give to on this date, and it's called Kupas Rabbeinu. And interesting that I don't. Kupas Rabbeinu. Yes, Kupas Rabbeinu. If you want to write it down, it's Post Office Box 288, Brooklyn, New York, 11225. That's where I'm going to send my money. And what you do is you read, you either think of how the Rebbe stand up, wash your hands first, write out the check or whatever you're going to do, or you can put money in a pushka, and then you imagine yourself standing in front of the Rebbe and you read the letter, and anyways, it's a very, very, very valuable day not to be wasted. So I want to talk a little.
You write a message of whatever you need help with, and you put money in the pushka or you donate it, and then you stand and just read it as though you're reading it to the Rebbe.
That's right. You can look at a picture of the Rebbe if you want as you're reading the letter. That sometimes helps a person concentrate. So
and when do you do that? Anytime during the day?
Anytime during that night or day. And there's a famous rabbi, oh golly, what's his name? Yol Khan. He was Yol Khan. He passed away. I think he passed away in COVID. And he was an enormous scholar of Hasidic thought, and the biggest scholar in, outside of the Rebbe, the biggest scholar in Lubavitch. And when he was 12 or 13, he asked his Rebbe, how do I write a pon? I want to write a pon to the Rebbe. And his Rebbe said, okay, this is what you do. You imagine yourself in front of the Rebbe, and and you write ana la'orer. That's the beginning of the Hebrew word for please, to arouse mercy on the soul of whatever. And he couldn't get past the word orer without bursting into tears, because every time he imagined himself standing in front of the Rebbe, the mashpia, the older man, he just and the 12-year-old kept saying again and again, how do I write what do I do? How do I write a pon? And the Rebbe would try and say, well, you write or and he tried 3 times and he figured out, forget it, I'm giving up on this guy. And then he asked another adult, and the other adult told him exactly what to write. And he said later, the other adult taught me how to write to the Rebbe, but my Rebbe, my teacher, my first one, he taught me how to write to the Rebbe, and that you do it with all your heart and soul. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, Hashem is a soul surgeon, like a surgeon of the soul, and the Rebbe is a surgeon of the soul also. And sometimes when you undergo surgery, it's not clear right away what's happening. And obviously, what happened a couple of days ago in Yerushalayim was a kind of surgery. Now, and it's very hard to understand. Like, if you didn't understand what surgery was and you saw somebody cutting open a body, you were like from Mars and you landed on Earth, you saw somebody cutting open a body, you would be horrified. You would say, stop that guy, arrest that guy. But the guy is really a doctor, and he's doing an important thing for the person. So too with Hashem, and so too with the Rebbe. That's what happens in life. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it briefly again, because it's very much like the second story that I'm going to tell. The second story is about the Rebbe. My story is about the Rebbe and Hashem. I'm sure you remember, perhaps, that many years ago, Yeheskel Shimon and I, we were minding our own business. I was 51. We were minding our own business. We had already tried everything to have kids, and we tried to. There was no Jewish kid. There simply are no Jewish children that are up for adoption. It never happens. The community, even though there are tragedies, the Jewish community absorbs the child immediately, and they give it to an aunt, an uncle. It never goes to the state, that's for sure. And it's just simply impossible to adopt a Jewish child. So one day when I was 51, and I was, as I like to say, I was minding my own business, I got a call. Would you like to adopt a Jewish child? Now, at that point, we thought that we were finished with such things, but such an offer never happens. It doesn't happen in the history of the world. What do you mean, adopt a Jewish child? A Jewish mother is giving up her baby for adoption. It doesn't happen. And so we felt, because it was so rare, that we had to look into it. And we did look into it. And I'm going to make the story very short. We dealt with these people in California who it was like dealing with. They both said that they were Jewish, the lawyer and the agency, the head of the agency. I doubt both cases. I know the lawyer wasn't. For sure she wasn't. But the agency head, I really doubt about her also. It was a tremendous, tremendous scam. And Yeheskel Shimon and I went through a whole summer of it. We got into it. We accepted the offer. We and every time we said we want, every time we said what we needed, they would agree to it, and then they would renege on what they said. No, you can't have that. We want to hear, the mother was pregnant. Can we have at least a doctor's report about how the mother's doing? Sure. And then after we gave the money, forget it. No doctor's report. No, nothing. They wouldn't give us the simplest thing. It was really like dealing with the Arab market. And sorry if anybody's offended by that analogy, but you had to go shopping in the Arab market in the olden days to know what I'm talking about. And I don't mean any, I'm sure there are very wonderful Arabs. The Druze are very wonderful people in Israel, but there is such a thing as an Arab market, and it's not an easy thing to deal with. And so anyway, we went through the whole summer, and at the end of the summer, 4 days before she gave birth, she dropped us, and she burned. So at that point, we lost $45,000. But much worse than the $45,000 was the summer that we had gone through. I lost my emotional health. I was a wreck at that point. It was so difficult dealing with them. And a few days before Rosh Hashanah, I couldn't understand why Hashem did this to me. Why? I was just sitting there minding my own business. I didn't ask for that phone call, and I couldn't understand it. And the year went on, and I did things to rebuild my emotional health. I did various things, and at the end of and as late winter happened and early spring, I had made, in Rosh Hashanah time, I was crumbling. I was in a terrible, terrible state. And I wrote down a list of things that I could do to help myself. And I had gone through many of the things on that list, and I had gotten stronger and stronger and stronger again. And but then I looked and I saw number one on the list I didn't do. I never did it. Number one on the list, my first idea was to learn Torah, to learn like the Rebbe's talks with a local Rebbetzin, an older local Rebbetzin. And anyway, I'll skip all the details, but I had asked her a long time ago. I had asked her years before. She had learned with a friend of mine who had difficulty having children, and she learned with my friend once, and my friend got pregnant. And so I always teased her, and I said, Mrs. Gurkoff, you have to learn with me too. And she would say, sure. But then Mrs. Gurkoff left my shul. She was like, you know, she was older and she stopped going, and we stopped having any. I didn't know her well in the first place at all, but we stopped having any interaction. But on the top of my list of things I could do to help myself, I thought maybe learn Hasidus with Mrs. Gurkoff. And so I had put that down on my list, but I hadn't been in touch with Mrs. Gurkoff for 5 years. And I decided, you know what, let's do the number one thing on the list. Let's call Mrs. Gurkoff. So it was a Friday, and I called Mrs. Gurkoff. Her answering machine was on. She was not there. And I said, Mrs. Gurkoff, remember me? It's Shalom Yehudis Goodfriend. Many, many years ago, you said you'd learn the Rebbe's Torah with me. I'm wondering if I could still do that with you. If we could, learn once or twice or something like that. If we could learn. And so I hung up. I mean, that was my message. I didn't get a call back before Shabbos, but on Saturday night, I got a call from her. And she said, Shalom Yehudis, I want to tell you something. Neither one of us had been in touch for 5 years, and we barely knew each other to begin with. And she said, I didn't get your message before Shabbos because I had left to go spend Shabbos with my son in Stoughton, my son and his family in Stoughton. So you called Friday afternoon, I had already left. And, back then it was before cell phones. Before cell phones were really popular, she didn't have a cell phone. I left my message on a regular answering machine. So she said, I didn't hear it. I went down to Stoughton. She said, but while I was in Stoughton, all Shabbos, I kept saying to myself, Shalom Yehudis Goodfriend. Wasn't I supposed to learn Torah with her? Whatever happened to that? And she would do something else, and all of a sudden she'd say, Shalom Yehudis Goodfriend. I was supposed to learn Torah with her. I was supposed to learn the Rebbe Sichos with her. I wonder what happened. I wonder why we never did anything. And she did it all through Shabbos, and she was thinking, why am I thinking about this? She came home. She turned on her answering machine. There was a voice she hadn't heard for 5 years. It was Shalom Yehudis Goodfriend. Would you consider learning Torah? Can we do what we said we would do 5 years ago? And so we both saw so clearly the hand of God. It was like this was a shidduch that was meant to be. We learned Torah for the next 4 years. And because of that, that's where I got all my skills. And not only that, it opened an entirely new world for me. My learning of the Rebbe Sichos changed my life and made me a completely different person. And I am intensely grateful for it. It is such a big part of my life today. It is such a big part of my life. And it is such a big part of who I am. I'm a teacher at Shayla House, and that's a big part of my life. And I learn, and I'm a wife, and I learned the Rebbe Sichos. And it's enormous to me. And so before, when I entered into that awful situation, that adoption fiasco, I wasn't on a path to learn the Rebbe Sichos. I was just like doing whatever I was doing. And Hashem wanted to open me up to something more. And what did he do? He crushed me. He absolutely crushed me. And then in desperation, when I was looking for something, I found this thing. And this thing made me into an entirely different person. So Hashem is a soul surgeon. We can't see in the short run what he's doing. I'm going to tell you now another very short story. And
when you found this thing, what thing did you find? You mean the classes with
the classes? The classes were. It nurtured a part of my soul that was never nurtured. I'm a much stronger person. I'm a different person. I'm so grateful. Just like Torah, when I became frum, I used to sing on my front porch in Key West. I used to sing to Hashem, you make me feel like a natural woman. I felt like me more than any other time in my life, more than before I was frum. It enabled my soul. My soul came to the surface, and you feel it. You feel like you're a completely different person. I've often said that comparing frum to before I was frum. I was happy and amused when I was happy and amused when I was not frum, but I didn't know what happiness was. I didn't know happiness until I became frum. I didn't know what it really could be. And it was like I felt after I became frum was like the beginning of my life. I was walking on eggshells. I didn't know I was walking on eggshells. And when I became frum, all of a sudden it felt like I was walking on solid ground. And so anyway, I want to it's 8 o'clock. I can't do it. I'm going to end there, and I'm going to do my other story next week. So,
Okay.
so anyway, I want to thank you both for joining, and I want to thank all the other people who are online, and and uh, and we will and I'm going to turn off the recorder in case you have any questions.